Hello and welcome once again to another edition of IFN News.
In court today, Tory heavyweight Ken Clarke. Clearly troubled by the claims having been brought to his attention by his own son, Clarke was emphatic in his denial of any association with Ian Greer or Ian Greer Associates. And, despite a vigorous examination, the claims he said were fantasy, off the Richter scale, and that it had come to him like Martian's landing. Clarke stated that this was the first time he'd met his accuser and fixed his steely gaze upon him several times throughout. Ben Fellows was next to take the stand and took a severe drubbing from the prosecution, yet he remained calm throughout despite several suggested contradictions. The case continues. Well, that's the end of proceedings now for day 6 at the Old Bailey trial of Regina versus Fellows. And if one thing has come out that's apparent, it's contradictions, and today was certainly no different at all. I'm joined, of course, once again by Deborah Williams from the Kent Freedom Movement. Deborah, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you.
Contradictions. What did you observe?
Regarding the allegations in Ian Greer's office of sexual assault to Ben Fellows, Ben said it wasn't upsetting at all. It was weird. And then he went on to say, no more than a grope in a nightclub. And then Ben said in his statement and in the doc, I felt later on in the afternoon, I felt disgusted, I was upset, I felt quite emotional. And then the prosecution repeated, you felt upset and quite emotional? And he said, yes, it was weird. Prosecution said, this is the opposite of what you said this morning. You said you wasn't upset at all. It was weird, he said. Are you just making this up as you go along, Mr. Fellows?
Well, he's certainly given it to him, pulling no punches, the prosecutor, isn't he? So,
right.
Obviously he's not happy with the statements that he's received, and obviously in the cross-examination, Fellows has obviously come across with a differing opinion. Mm-hmm. So I suppose in time you can change your opinion about something, and in time you might feel it's not such a big deal, but I think he didn't think it was such a big deal at the time, did he?
No, he didn't, no.
Yeah, but in the statement he did say that it was something distressing for him, I believe.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the other thing you found?
Well, the other thing I found was that it was brought up that Ben was claiming that he went to Dolphin Square. And he also said this in his interview at Belgravia.
That's right.
The prosecution said, there was no mention of Dolphin Square in your statement. Ben said, it was because I was exhausted. Well, as we heard earlier with Julianne White, it took 8 hours to conclude his statement. That's quite a long time. And then later on we found out that the prosecution said at the time of the interview, this was already on the internet, allegations of Dolphin Square. The prosecution implied if this was something else that Ben had added.
So basically the prosecution's case against Fellows is that he's just adding things it, adding things to the story, embellishing by facts that are being published. Okay, and there was one other thing too, and that was the fire. Remember the fire that destroyed the tapes?
Iron Mountain.
Iron Mountain fire, that's right. So again, the prosecution suggested that he was aware of that, and therefore he might use the idea that these tapes had gone in a fire, and therefore he could say what was on the tapes. Was that the inference, do you think?
Yeah, that was the inference, that he was making things up as he went along, and also linking his stories with what he'd heard on the internet and from others, as well as what he'd researched himself.
True, of course, but in fairness, if there is no evidence to view, it's only hearsay and supposition by the prosecution themselves.
Yes, of course.
Well, what can I say, Deborah? It's a very interesting case. It's been long, it's been difficult. It's almost like the 8-hour drubbing he must have gone through, I suppose. And I guess that is a long time to be interviewed, isn't it? I suppose maybe the police might be reviewing how they spend so much time interviewing someone. But like I said, a lot of interesting points, a lot of contradictions, and he took a drubbing. And I think also, going back to Ken Clarke this morning, must be very difficult for the man. I mean, he's a great Tory heavyweight, very, very well known, and he's suddenly faced with an enormous allegation, and he's ended up having to explain things in the court and get cross-examined. How do you think he felt?
Well, I mean, even though he was severely cross-examined, I think he appeared quite cool and calm about the things.
I think so. I think he stood up very well to the whole thing, and I have to say also, it looks like the defendant, Fellows, also seems to just hold his own. So what's going to happen? I guess it's over to the jury to make their decision.
It is.
When the summing up, we hope maybe the summing up might happen tomorrow?
Yeah, summing up should be happening
Possibility
tomorrow,
of that?
hopefully.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, we'll keep looking at this and bringing you the news as it comes through, and at the end of each day, of course, we'll provide that summary for you. It's IFN. Thanks for joining us.
From the team and myself, thanks for joining us today.